Do you want to go? Let's go to wrestling first. Um, Here's my wrestling take from the weekend. It's more wrestling-ish than I'm. For as much as we have said that it is Penn State wrestling's world, and we're just living in it. It is Gable Stevenson's world, and we are just living in it. He is
That's the truth.
like he made Greg look silly. Like you could tell he's an Olympic champion, and the other guy was not in that match. And I think that was my one ish takeaway. My other takeaway then was the Carter match was a little too close for comfort for me. And I think a lot of people had prognosticated that I forget what his last name is. I know his first name is Max. He was going to kind of take care of business or could be a threat to Carter, and sure enough, he was. And I thought that was interesting. All in all, I think, to your point though, I think a relatively noteless weekend for Penn State.
Yeah, I think the thing that I took away from it was, well, the Josh Barr injury is probably a concern. I mean, I don't think it's a national championship ending concern, but it certainly doesn't help, depending on what he can or can't do. Um, and for me, it was a bigger than Penn State thing, and maybe I missed this for a year, but for so long, college wrestling and pro wrestling did not get along. Like, Kurt Angle wins a national championship. When he would want to come back to events, it was almost like, oh, Kurt's in here. I don't know if we can really acknowledge these here. Now we're giving out belts for Big Ten titles, right? Like, it's funny how the world changes. Like, 10 years ago, the wrestling purists would be like, no, you couldn't possibly do that. But now, there they are.
I
So,
I had this written down because I wanted to ask your opinion on it because I knew you would be fired up in some shape or fashion
oh, I'm not
about it.
fired. To me, it's interesting. I mean, it's almost funny how persona non grata Kurt Angle was to some purists when he would come back during his pro wrestling career
Mhm.
and be around events or even think about being at an event. And probably didn't happen a lot because he was busy with his stuff, but it was almost like, oh, well, he went pro wrestling route. He's not really a wrestler anymore. And here we are now in 2025, handing out belts to everybody, who's a champ. And because they're cool, right? Because people see him and know they mean you won. So I think that's interesting. And that Penn State grabbed 5 of them. Good for them. And I think they're marching towards nationals in a good position.
It's much better than any stinking trophy that they would get.
Certainly, it's so much better than, look, I appreciate and really respect the tradition of holding up the bracket, right? And you're standing there with the medal around your neck and you have the bracket. That's cool. But I'll tell you what, I bet you every one of those wrestlers would say, well, I don't need to hold the bracket if I can sling that belt over my
Yeah,
shoulder,
I,
right?
I,
So,
the belts were really cool. It's so funny you wrote that, or you had that because I wrote that down. I wanted to ask you about it. I, I wonder, and I was thinking about this then because one of the reasons I wanted to ask you about this is Carter then goes and has a little bit of an interesting press conference after the match, and I've been thinking about like I think one of the things that's most interesting to me about college wrestling in particular, and I think probably to a lot of people, is like more so than any other college sport right now, we are seeing a lot of personality from these athletes. Um, you can debate the merits of like if you enjoy that and if you like that or not, but I think like I applaud the Big Ten for kind of leaning into it with the belts because like that kind of goes with that flow, if you will. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I thought that was actually probably the true highlight of a relatively not boring, but as you put it, Penn State Invitational, and it was cool. I liked it.
yeah, I think the personality piece is interesting and good for them and a wise decision because it is an individual sport. A team's going to win a national championship. Individuals are going to win a national championship. And what draws, what has worked for UFC and the WWE, and now we're in the name NIL era for all college sports is personalities, right? So go ahead and as long as it's not too crazy, and I don't know that you can reel it in, but go ahead and let them show who they are,
Yeah,
right? Let them talk a little bit because they've tried everything else in terms of college wrestling to broaden their fan base, and nothing's. I mean, they're out there more now than ever, but I think the core is still the core, and then and growing beyond that isn't really far. Maybe you do it with some personalities and some interest, and you get some interesting stuff along the way. Then you get some false starts along the way, like the Strachey Gabe Arnold thing that just has been going on forever, and I'm not sure they'll ever wrestle. And not that they need to, but right, like that's the kind of silliness you do get because the media buys into that stuff too and starts trying to sell it. But no, I thought it was good for Penn State and good for the sport, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. Nationals in Philadelphia should be a lot of fun, and especially for Penn State wrestling fans.
Yeah. No, I didn't. I like I said, it was a good weekend. Good sports weekend.